Namaste. I'm Akashic Song, and there's an ice cream truck going by. Just let him go. um, how are y'all doing? I know we got a lot on our shoulders right now. We have a lot that we're dealing with. There's a lot that we're trying to manage and muddle through, and try to do so gracefully. I know that gracefully is maybe a little bit of a stretch. I was I was in the grocery store, and I had talked to myself, and I was like feeling like very clear on who I was in this moment, and that I wasn't going to panic, and I was just going to get the things that I needed. And for that 1 second, that one part of my shadow that just, is still kind of present was like, but what if you can't leave your house? Or what if we get taken to some military base? Or what if? And there was a woman in the aisle with me, and there were these case of like, I think there were 12 or 15 packs of toilet paper, and she had about 5 of them. And probably 10 gallons of water and a couple cases of beer. And it was like at that moment that I kind of snapped out of that fear. And I just had to laugh inside, like, yeah, I'm not going to give in to this. I'm not going to do that. And I've had many times coming up on I've been home for about a week and a half. Coming up on going into my second full week of working from home, I've had moments where I went through the different stages of grief, disbelief that this is actually really happening, and fear and anger at what this is doing to some people who don't have the flexibility to work from home, or don't even have those kinds of positions where that could happen, or people whose children can't go to school, and they're trying to figure out how to get lesson plans, and folks that can't even afford to take to not have their children in daycare or what have you. And so I went through that stage of just anger and bitterness that this was happening. And I was okay with all of those emotions. I even had a little bit of panic. And panic is okay, because I have dealt with anxiety my whole life. Yes, even as a spiritual person, as a person who meditates and does yoga and is walking a spiritual path, absolutely, you can still, have underlying emotions that, grab onto that shadow and want to bring you into panic, because it's familiar. Because as scary as an anxiety attack feels, it's also familiar, and I know what's going to happen. I know I'm not going to die. I know at the very end of it, some energy is going to be released, and I'm going to feel okay. Do I want to have panic attacks? Absolutely not. But I've learned how to manage them so that when they happen, number one, they aren't as threatening. I don't feel as terrified. It's kind of like this physiological thing that's happening, and once I feel it coming, instead of fighting it, which that seemed to make it worse. So that's a tip for you if you're somebody who's experiencing anxiety attacks. Instead of fighting the anxiety and trying to not have it, let it happen. And the whole time it's happening, what I found when I just let it happen, there's a part of me that's able to step outside and watch myself from outside and remind myself to breathe and start to whisper a mantra to myself. And something will tell me to do Satali Pranayam. It's like all of those exercises, all of that training comes back to you in those moments. If you just don't fight what your body is doing, if the ego doesn't get involved, eventually the body will settle. And so I was even okay with that. What I wasn't okay with was the grief, the sadness. When I started to feel really sad that people have lost their lives, and I know that we're dealing with something that the elderly and our elders and folks who have immune challenges, who have underlying health and medical issues already are most at risk. Every time we have severe cases of the flu, but that doesn't make it better, right? Like it doesn't make me feel better. And this is a little different because we haven't had a situation where so many of us now are working from home or don't have that ability and are taking risks, or, you know, my brother simply right now doesn't have work because of the field that he works in. So there are a lot of different things happening. And as an empath, when that sadness came over me and I let that spill out and I allowed myself to cry and I let myself be sad and I let myself feel the gravity of how this is affecting others, it was like a healing purge, but it was also one of those things where I knew there had to be a cap on how long I could be sad, because the fact of the matter is I still have to maintain my health and my strength and my spiritual awareness, and the vibration that I'm holding on this planet as well. And so I let myself be sad and I let myself cry and I let myself feel how I felt. And then I put on my empath stone and I grabbed my mask and, you know, I went to the grocery store and I got the things that I needed. And it was like this interesting kind of reminder of the middle path, right? The balance between living a holy spiritual life where there's magical thinking happening 24 hours a day and everything is musical and there's spirit and we're all, you know, fairies are going to come out and sing and dance for us and everything's going to be okay. And then the other side, some people are going to lose their lives. And that's real. And so, yes, I did my yoga and I did my pranayama and I did my meditation. And then, yes, I also took my airborne and I put on my mask and I got my, you know, the spiritual pieces that I needed to feel grounded and embodied going out into the world and not taking on the fear, because that's the other thing in this kind of a situation, that people ramp each other up. Forgive my bra, sorry. People ramp each other up and they're trying to be helpful by saying, you know, the things that they're saying about what we're experiencing and how it's spreading and all of the woe is me. Like, they think that they're being helpful, and information is important and it is helpful, but there's also a level of ramping each other up. And I don't know, I think I just wanted to share a perspective that came to me in the last week. And I haven't filmed in about a month, maybe 3 weeks, I'm not sure, but I haven't filmed in that long simply because I felt this quietude coming over me. I felt this need to be silent. I felt this need to hold space for some involuntary shadow work that was coming up. And I didn't know what it was, but I felt something kind of pulling on me and needing me to face it. And even sitting with one of my guides and having her say, "It is time," and not knowing what that meant and not getting any more direction. And I felt like something was pulling me. I felt very clear that I was being asked to allow, to just be receptive, to not run from what was coming up, to not run from the fear that was coming up, to not run from the anger or the bitterness or the grief or the worry about the future, to not run from it, but to sit in that uncertainty and to sit in that discomfort and allow my true self, allow my higher self to show me what needed to be purged. We talk a lot about shadow work in this community, and how important it is to face those things, to go into those dark places and be rinsing yourself out, right? To be releasing those trapped parts of yourself that aren't integrated and that are wreaking havoc on your life and relationships because they're not integrated. And I've had some interesting experiences lately around shadow work, particularly it being something that maybe I didn't actively go into seeking or make a clear conscious decision that, you know what, I'm gonna deal with this thing that's coming up. It was kind of involuntary that I would be engaged in some activity at work and feel the emotion first and not know what to call it, not know what to name what was happening, and then very clearly have a strong knowing, oh, this is a shadow. And for the first time in my life, I gotta say that I've had major resistance. And I think that's why, because in the past, I knew that something was an issue and I made a decision about how I was going to move it. And I actively did journaling prompts or took a walk to meditate and wrote down the things associated and did, burning rites to release that stuff and did magic around it and all of that. And this was different. It was being in real life situations and having really intense clarity coming up to say, this feeling that you have right now is some really old shit that you now have to face. And that's how my month has been, honestly. That's how March has been for me, is just moment after moment after moment. And maybe that's what it is time meant, is that this old shit needs to move so that you can get into the next phase of who you're going to be. And it has been holding you back. I've been dealing with major shit around self-confidence and speaking up and using my voice and doing all of this work around throat chakra, resistance to even sitting down in front of this camera. Like, why am I resisting that? And the stuff that's been coming up has been so old, and things that I thought I was so far past. And some things I didn't even know that I had as an issue, that I had as a shadow. I had a really beautiful conversation earlier with Divine Mother. And I realized that my version of divine femininity is soft, right? Is forgiving, is loving, is accepting, is almost this like idealized form of motherhood. She doesn't yell at you. She doesn't throw things. She's in control of her emotions. And, I was neglecting a part of myself that is actually very feral, that is aggressive, that can be demonstrative, that can be fierce, that fights for her opinions, that needs to say certain things and doesn't back down from her opinion. And that side of myself has been very repressed in the past couple years, has been very repressed, and has just been kind of under the surface, just bubbling. And I think that's what's been so like a shock to my system, like the Tower card, like for real, for me right now. Having all this time to be in my home, staying healthy. I don't have anywhere to go from these shadows. There's no one that I have to respond to other than, you know, someone on the other end of the telephone or on my computer. So when you can't walk away from yourself, those involuntary shadow work moments don't let up, because there's nowhere to go and there's no distractions. So I wanted to share that with you all. If you are working from home, or not working but at home, or in some kind of shelter-in-place situation, I wanted to share that this could be a great time to just say a prayer of receptivity. I am open and available to receive the messages from Spirit that will bring me into my higher awareness. I am open and receptive to the messages from Spirit that will bring me into my highest awareness. I am open and receptive to the messages from Spirit that will bring me into my highest awareness. And allow yourself to have some time in silence. If it's an hour, if it's, 2 hours, allow yourself to have some silent time. Because once you open up that space in your psyche for those downloads, then you have to actually shut down some of the senses so it's not being blocked. So those messages can actually be received. And then when they start coming, make space to have whatever emotion is going to follow it. If it's tears, if it's laughter, if it's dancing. I've had so many fits of just wild dancing and just silliness, right? Just energy, just moving. That's that Kundalini energy, just trying to move shit out of your way. Let that happen. Let it happen. And if you're alone, then all the best, the better. If you're not alone, if you live with other people, if you can separate yourself for a little while, say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go spend an hour just in quietude, just do some journaling or, whatever. And just be silent. Don't actually journal. That's going to be my prompt. Don't journal. Don't spend time thinking and writing. Spend time receiving. Even if you're still doing activities, it's a great way to allow some of those shadows that are right there on the surface. Because look, you can't buy this kind of forced sadhana. And I'm the type of person that, while I wish this was not happening in the world, I'm going to use it to my advantage as much as I can in this moment. And there's clearly some stuff that's been coming up to be purged from me. So I'm going to let that happen. And I'm not going to try to block that. I'm not going to try to stop it. And I'm expressing myself so much more. I'm expressing so much more vulnerability than I ever have. I was talking to my supervisor the other day, and she was just asking me how I'm doing. And I was so honest. I told her about the panic attack, about crying and whatever. And she was telling me about her experiences. And that's important, to not try to hold this brave face all the time, because that's a shadow for me. That may not be one of your shadows. So I'm not going to go on and on and on and on and on. I just kind of wanted to share that if you have this time to be homebound or wherever you are, if your days are a little quieter, try to make some space to let things that want to move. And don't run from what comes up. Now, if what's coming up is, you know, based in trauma that you might need support around, make sure you have those support systems. If you have a friend that you can reach out to, if you have a therapist who's still taking calls, there are hotlines that you can call. So make sure that if you know that you have trauma in the past and that could be something that comes up for you in this time, make space for that and make sure that you have support around that. So I also want to say happy Spring Equinox. I know it was probably a weird one for me. I always kind of treat the Spring Equinox as this like massive return of the sun and spend a lot of time outside, and I didn't do that this time because, you know, like I said, I was going through some emotions at the time. But I did make room last night to put out a slice of carrot cake on my Sabbath altar, and I made some time to just offer gratitude for what I know is going to evolve. So sometimes you're not always going to feel like celebrating, even if you may not even be someone who celebrates the Sabbaths anyway. But if you are, and this one didn't feel very jovial and sunny and happy, there were no bunnies. Actually, there was a bunny in my yard because that bunny is still visiting me, the white rabbit. And it's a real rabbit. I'm not on drugs. There is a little white rabbit that comes every couple days and sits in my yard. And he actually was there last night, and that actually made me really happy. But yeah, I made some time. I was not feeling in the mood for Ostara at all. But I made some time last night to just light the candle on the Sabbath altar, put out a slice of cake. I just offered a prayer to Oshun, and I just took some deep breaths and burned some incense and went back to, whatever it was I was doing. So that's another thing too. Don't force yourself to do things that feel like this is what I should be doing. This is a time where the earth is asking us to be in our authenticity, to be willing to accept healing and to release what's not serving us, because that's exactly what she's doing. So I do hope that you all had a peaceful Ostara, and that you are having some time in this lockdown situation to refresh and to bring yourself to peace. And if you're not feeling well, if you are someone who's affected by the virus, my heart and my prayers go out to you. And I am doing mindfulness prayers for folks at night before I go to bed. And so I am saying a prayer for everybody affected by this. So I do wish you health and wealth and sustenance and beauty, and may the light of awareness cast out all of your shadows. Namaste.